So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Our organizations are really excited to offer this presentation to you because Model UN is quite different this year. There are a number of challenges that have been posed to every student, every teacher, and also every conference organizer around the world. And Model UN has had to adapt just like everyone else to the new circumstances of COVID-19. So we really wanted to all put together this presentation for you because we wanted to discuss some of the ways in which both schools and conferences have been adapting to this new world and how everyone can still participate in Model UN, no matter what the circumstances of your school or community might be. Model UN strives to always be a very inclusive and holistic activity, and that is more so true this year than any other year. So before getting started, I want to introduce our four presenters. I'm going to let Kevin begin, and then we can work our way counterclockwise, and I'll wrap up the end here. So Kevin, if you'd like to briefly introduce yourself.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. So my name is Kevin Felix Chan, which makes my initials KFC, and I'm the co-founder of Best Delegate. Many of you may have come across the website before, bestdelegate.com, which is the world's leading resource for Model UN with over 900,000 users every year. We also do lots of different virtual programming, such as the Virtual Model United Nations Institute, which are like summer programs, as well as virtual Model UN conferences every month, beginner level training conferences, as well as advanced level invitationals. And Model UN is thriving during this time. We've had over 3,200 students do Model UN programs with us since COVID started. And that's Best Delegate. My own personal background, I did Model UN in high school and college. And then now professionally, I've had a chance to teach Model UN in 20 countries around the world and also organize over a dozen conferences at the United Nations headquarters, with my personal highlight being introducing then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at the UN headquarters. Awesome to be here and excited to talk to everyone here.
Angela, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Angela Shively. I am a member of the National Model UN Advisory Group for both our New York and our DC conferences. Most recently, I was the Secretary General of NMUN New York up until March, when our conference was unfortunately canceled. I spent 10 years as a part of volunteer staff for National Model United Nations, and I was a delegate before that. And I'm really happy to be here and get to talk to some fellow Model UNers.
Thank you. And Judith, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thanks for organizing this, Chris. I'm the founder and Chief Strategy Officer for the Montessori Model United Nations program. We began holding conferences at the UN in New York in 2006. And what makes our program perhaps a little different is that our focus is on students 9 to 15 years of age, which we believe is the foundation for the development of social justice. While Montessori is we are an inclusive organization. Students and teachers from every variety of programs have joined us, and every continent, including homeschoolers. We did name our organization after Dr. Montessori in light of her words to UNESCO. She was a member of UNESCO, and she told the UN they needed to listen to the students. They needed to hear their voices because their solutions to world's problems would be innovative and creative. Thank you. I'm excited to share with you today.
Thank you, Judith. And then quickly about me, I'm actually here representing two fantastic organizations. I am the executive director of IMUNA, which runs the MMUN conference that takes place in New York City. And I'm also the board chair for MUN Impact as well, which is a fantastic organization that focuses on bringing SDG education into Model United Nations and really connecting the work of Model UN to the world. I've been doing Model UN pretty much continuously since I was a high school student. I am very, very fortunate, and I fell in love with it from the very first conference that I attended. And it's been really a privilege to then give back to the community by creating these world-class opportunities for students to meet delegates from over 60 or 70 different countries at the same time and be able to go into the United Nations in many occasions. And it's just such a special feeling for me to be able to show students the wide world of global issues in the United Nations. So it's a real privilege to be able to speak with these other presenters here. They're all from fantastic, hardworking organizations that are doing so much to keep Model UN going this year. And more importantly, I'm excited to talk to all of you guys today who are attending. So I think a natural question that comes up, and when I talk to, especially school principals or people who aren't really all that involved with Model UN, one of the big questions that I often get is, why is Model UN an important issue this year? There are so many schools that are, facing huge budget deficits, that are struggling to just organize their basic classes. Why is Model UN important throughout all of that? And I think COVID-19 is the perfect example of the way in which global issues really can affect us in our day-to-day life. And when a lot of people think of global issues, they think of big trade agreements where it's hard to see the impact on their day-to-day life. Or they're thinking of nuclear disarmament or treaties between countries. When in reality, and I think all of us here know this better than the average person, Model UN shows us how these global issues really do affect our day-to-day lives and really do affect the way in which we operate at home and at work. And COVID-19 has just made that impact extraordinarily clear. And so even as the schools are facing all these cuts, and even as the schools are feeling stretched and the teachers have more and more of these pressures put upon them, Model UN is still an important aspect of a child education to help them understand their role in this world. Right. The other thing is that I've been saying this to people for a long time, virtual learning is probably here to stay even after COVID goes away. That virtual learning, while it has been a reaction of necessity and that people have not been able to participate in person the way that they ordinarily would like to, it's also a way for people to stay connected where they otherwise wouldn't be able to, where students from the Netherlands, for example, can attend a conference that's hosted by a school in San Diego. That would never, ever happen in the world before virtual conferences. But now even the most local conferences have the opportunity to attract this global audience because everybody is participating virtually. So while I hope and I know that we are all going to return to in-person Model UN one day, we're still going to be virtual learners to some degree. And I think it just remains to be seen how many of those opportunities stick around. Most importantly, though, and this can't be overstated enough, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, students still need the high quality education today, that this year of learning is still so vital. And we can't just say, oh, well, I guess we can't do things this year. They're going to have to wait until next year. Every day, every week, every month of a student's development is so, so important. And to just leave Model UN off of that would be a huge disservice to their overall holistic education. So that's what makes Model UN really important, even in the midst of COVID-19. So in this session, we're really going to cover three main topics. We're going to go into detail about each of them. One, what will Model UN conferences look like this year? And they're going to take many different shapes and forms, and I'm sure that conferences are going to come up with new plans that we didn't even talk about here. So this is an ever-evolving subject of discussion, but at least we can kind of share the information about where conferences are at now. We also want to talk about how students and schools can participate in Model UN, regardless of whatever the circumstances of their school are. Some schools haven't been able to meet with their Model UN club at all, and now the students have to participate individually. And some schools are fortunate that they can still meet in person or online. And we want to talk about strategies that you can use to participate in Model UN, whichever one of those categories you fall into. And last but not least, it's how can you organize the Model UN clubs this year? How can you continue to build a routine and make things feel as normal as possible, even when everything around us is fairly chaotic? I'm now going to turn things over to KFC from Best Delegate, and he's going to take over the presentation from here. Thank you, Kevin. Oh, I think you might be muted, Kevin.
Okay, Chris, can you hear me now? Okay, awesome. So, uh, yeah, MUN conferences have to adapt to COVID, just like how schools are. And I wanted to just quickly play this video to remind us what Model UN looks like. I think a lot of us haven't had a chance to do Model UN in 9 months, maybe even a year ago. So it's been a while when we normally have been doing this on a monthly basis. And that a lot of the things that we used to see in Model UN can actually translate to online. And for a lot of the conference organizers, we had to think and adapt and realize that we can innovate. And the thing is, it's not about creating, replicating the whole conference experience from in person to online, but like think about how does online look like? What are those tools? What are those tools? And then how can we do our best to create a native online experience that looks like Model UN? So here's just a quick video of that. Awesome. So just like how every school was making different responses to Model UN, so are every conference. We already know that Model UN conferences are very different. Every conference is unique. They want to do different things, and they're doing the same as well when it comes to individualized responses to virtual learning. I happened to take a look at the conference database back in September, so that's a month ago. But at that time, already 48% of conferences this year have announced dates for this year. And of those 48%, 72% of them have already designated that they're going to be virtual. There are some of them that mentioned they might be hybrid or in person or TBD. Another 45% of conferences still haven't announced their date. That's also typical for those that are in the spring. And only 7% of conferences have canceled. So Model UN is definitely happening. All the conferences are taking different approaches. And so that's allowing for new programming as well. I know MUN Impact, they've had this virtual summit that they've ran successfully twice now. We've had a chance to run Model UN Institute summer programs. So a lot of conferences are taking it online or doing something hybrid. And because of that, conference policies, including registration policy and refund policies, are also very different this year. I know a lot of conferences have different registration timelines. And the timeline that you might be used to for a regular conference may not be the same just because the conference may have changed their dates or just have a lot more flexibility this year to give schools a chance to register. I know for us, some of the programs we run, sometimes it's as close as 1 week before you can still register because it's so easy to add and drop delegates on the online space. You don't have to worry about classrooms to fill and lunches to order. And one other registration thing that's different is that in the online space, at least at Best Delegate, we've had a chance to also do individualized payments because sometimes teachers aren't in the position now to collect money when they're in the virtual space. So that's also helped as well. So, there's a lot of things that conferences are doing to adapt behind the scenes to make it easier for people to participate. At the end of the day, all the conferences have the same goal, which is to deliver that outstanding MUN experience to all students at all ages. And they're doing, whatever they can to serve those students. And at the end of the day, these are still the same passionate Model UN organizers and staff that love Model UN, want to give back their experience. They're taking a lot of time to plan their experiences. They're doing chair training, now just on Zoom, but they're doing chair training. And some of these conferences are still bringing in guest speakers and special events, which I found out is way easier to do in an online space. So for us, we had speakers from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime come speak because they don't have to fly to Vienna, fly from Vienna now. They can just come online and hop on as a keynote speaker. So, and ultimately, this is just the beginning. I think conferences are going to keep adapting and making changes, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen, but conferences are trying to adapt to COVID-19. And I think, that 45% TBD, I think a lot of them will end up hosting virtual conferences as well. And so what do we mean specifically by virtual conferences? So most of these conferences are held online on some sort of platform Zoom is what I've seen so far by far the most popular, but there are a lot of other platforms that exist out there. I know some conferences are using Discord, a couple have used Gatherly, and there's all sorts of, WebEx, there's all sorts of platforms out there. But basically, the platform is just some sort of video conferencing platform that allows some flexibility to make a speech in front of somebody like we are doing now, and also do some sort of breakout groups that allow students to work together and collaborate and write resolutions and present them. So most of these have replicated the functionality of a Model UN conference. The students are participating from home virtually, but they're still dressing up like they would for a Model UN conference. You saw in the video that I posted earlier, right? All the students were in WBA for the conference. So students are still dressing up. It's really cool, I think, from a parent's perspective. Whoa, my kid's dressing up on a Saturday in WBA to participate in the Model UN conference. That's really cool right now. And the conferences have adapted the rules of procedure to the online setting. So depending on the conference, maybe some conferences have unmods where it's text-based only because they aren't using Zoom. At least for those who do use Zoom, they are using breakout groups now. And some of the breakout groups may not be as fluid, but now Zoom has that option. The way that resolutions are drafted, submitted may also be different. Almost everyone is using Google Docs or something similar where everyone's just collaborating now. So it's not it's not handwriting resolutions, or I know at NMUN you guys write it on the big Post-its. So a lot of procedures have changed. I think a lot of the complex procedures have been thrown out just because the online space, we don't want to do so much complexity for points and motions. So we simplified that. And related to that is that many conferences are shortening their hours because of Zoom fatigue, and people don't want to spend so much time on screen. So some of the conferences might just be 6 hours, or just might be in 3-hour blocks, especially conferences that have an international base of students. In order to match time zones, maybe there's only 2-3 hours where everyone overlaps, and so they'll spread out their conference over several days.
Taking conferences to a digital platform means that things look a little different, but it's still very recognizable in the way things are running. Students speak and act for the most part just as they do at in-person conferences. We prepared a video for you so you can kind of gauge what this might look like for formal sessions and caucuses, and how fluid it can be in a digital platform.
The floor. Thank you, speaker. Are there any points or motions on the floor? Seeing none, we will now recognize our next speaker from the speakers list, which is Ghana. Ghana, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. The size of a nuclear weapon is relatively small, and with terrorism on the rise around the world, this dirty bomb can impact all of our countries worldwide. It provides a major terror threat. And not only that, the waste from the development of nuclear weapons must be stored somewhere. You know where it's going to be stored? In our countries, near our citizens. Is that what you want today? No. Another fact, it's a non-renewable resource. Today, we're shifting our focus towards climate change and impacting our community so for future generations down the road can live a free and happy life. But with nuclear energy and nuclear fuels, like plutonium and uranium, which are radioactive metals, that means they're non-renewable. And at the end of the day, it will impact our community. It will impact your citizens. Another fact, a nuclear weapon can fail because of a degraded delivery system.
Thank you very much, Speaker. That exhausts your time. Are there any points or motions on the floor? Yes, from Portugal.
Motion for a 5-minute unmoderated caucus.
That is in order at this time. All those in favor of a 5-minute unmoderated caucus, please raise your hands via Zoom now. All right, and all those opposed? All right, we are now in a 5-minute unmoderated caucus, and so I will send you all off to your breakout rooms right now.
Regulating nuclear weapons. We were talking about it as Ghana previously spoke in his speech. Would any nation like to say their point of view and jump on?
I would like to say my point of view, actually. I think it is very important that we discuss all the harmful effects that not only nuclear weapons as a whole, but their production, their simple existence may have, but we also need to know that there is no prohibition on building them and having them, as for now, at least at a major international obligatory scale. So we need to discuss not only if we want them or not, but also the right that countries might have to have them if they wish so. So I think that's also something that we need to have to consideration.
Ethiopia, would you like to add on?
Yeah, sure. Ethiopia was also thinking about the point that nuclear weapons create a power imbalance that favors countries that have more resources or that have exploited other countries like Ethiopia to get those resources. And it's quite unfair to continue without regulations because of this power imbalance, especially when the power imbalance goes towards more Western countries, which is why Ethiopia believes that the Dominican Republic's points were really good.
Some things we can point out is that a digital platform still allows for delegates to pursue what they're comfortable with when it comes to strategizing how they caucus and how they communicate with fellow delegates. There are new strategies that come with the online setting, just in the same way as in-person and virtual meetings for work can rely on different skills. Some things that are not seen include having a separate screen set up for the speakers list and a timer, practicing microphone etiquette, which, preventatively keeps noise from interfering with the recording. And also showing students in different breakout rooms, which they can choose to move around in. A lot of conferences are creating these digital spaces for people to move fluidly from group to group, similar to how they do in person. I think the big theme of this meeting today is engagement and how everybody just really wants to keep that going. 2020 has been quite the year for everyone and has resulted in so many new and different challenges. Enrichment opportunities like Model UN have been canceled in various places. We've all been adapting and trying to focus on how we do day-to-day obligations like work, school, grocery shopping, safe interactions with people who share similar passions, and just figuring out a way to safely interact with family and close friends that are usually a part of your everyday life. Enrichment activities like Model UN, for example, are still really important for a lot of us and something that we continue to try to bring new people into the fold. Our Model UN family gets bigger every day. Schools are in person, some are almost all virtual, some switch back and forth unplanned, kind of walking a line between cautious optimism and normalcy. For us, Model UN is a part of what we knew as our everyday lives and something that, we plan for as if it's a moving target, and being adaptive and flexible is really important as we work to keep Model UN programs and participation really prevalent. Guidance points for these things is checking conference websites, making sure that you know how things have changed for that particular conference, checking prices, registration dates, and really just not making assumptions, because as things have changed for students and faculty advisors, things have changed for conferences too. Support is a big thing that goes hand in hand with a Model UN family. And I think the biggest theme here is that we want to help. We want to help each other. We want to help organizations and conferences that we've attended for a really long time. And we want to, help our schools and our programs and keep these enrichment activities going. whether you're in need of financial aid or resources for training for students online, running trainings for your program, most conferences want to do whatever they can to help. The key thing here is that, there needs to be a discussion, asking for help, communicating your needs, and really letting people know where the gaps are that you need help filling. Collaboration is really what keeps us going. Another thing is trying a new conference. Digital adaptation has made conferences more accessible for a lot of programs, actually. There's also a question of the digital divide, which has made attendance a bit more complicated, especially internationally. Ordinarily, trying a new conference is really expensive. There are travel fees, registration fees, not to mention just the time and energy that goes into planning and traveling. But we have an opportunity here. So if one of your usually scheduled conferences, your home or primary conference is canceled, you can check out something new. Maybe there's an international conference you've always wanted to attend. You may be able to work with students from another region and not have to incur the cost of travel. So another really predominant question is, what if Model UN is canceled at my school? Individual participants have been welcome at most conferences, even before the pandemic. More students are taking advantage of this now than ever before. Even if you have a club that still meets, you're still welcome to register for other conferences on your own. For example, there's the MUN Impact Summit you may want to look into. Something we frequently see is that younger students may want to get involved, and with this just probably comes a little bit more parent participation. To assist with trainings, most conferences are still offering digital versions of written guides, and some are also offering interactive lessons. I always say the initials, Chris pronounced this differently, but IMUNA is offering weekly webinars for registered delegates, and conferences have specific guides and tutorials available on their individual websites. For example, speaking on behalf of NMUN, the DC conference has a video up explaining how they'll be using digital templates, what delegates can expect from a digital conference, and all of this is in addition to the standard prep guides and committee-specific background guides that they prepare regularly and update annually. There are other skills-based programs. MUN at Home is a great free program. Best Delegate trainings are offered pretty regularly, and they have a wealth of information on the website just at your fingertips. MUN is best enjoyed as part of a group. Conferences are often happy to connect you to another school from your area that's already planning on attending the conference, and sometimes you can be trained as part of their group. This can't always be arranged, but it is something that's been done many times before. And this is also a great opportunity for student leadership. Taking the initiative can relieve some of the burden instructors are feeling internationally. And so by doing the legwork, organizing, making those connections as a student participant, discovering those new ways to keep Model UN going is just something that you can absolutely continue to do. So I talked a while ago on resources. There are abundant resources we can all share, and more are coming available very frequently. We've put up some links and some resources here. You can also use the keywords to use the Google function and pull up individual websites. As you can see, Best Delegate is doing an interactive training webinar hosted on November 10th. So the time zones are getting funky, but definitely tune into that and continue to keep an eye out for new resources as they come in.
It's my turn. Well, I hope you're beginning to see that virtual conferences really are a natural progression. It allows us to come together, our communities, and they really give energy, inspiration, and joy in the face of the impact of COVID. But you know, at its heart, Model UN is a simulation. It's a game, but it's a game with tremendous transformative power because it's a serious game. We also all know that after COVID, our societies are going to need to be rebuilt. The leadership skills needed to repair the world that we want and create the world that we want for the future are exactly those skills that are honed in Model UN conferences. Critical thinking, collaboration, listening, negotiation, problem solving, international perspective, and relationship building. Some of you may have heard of Arundhati Roy. She's an author and a poet, and she has written a poem that's titled, "The Pandemic is a Portal." It's a portal to the future that we all want. And in that way, it's in all of our interest to join Model UN virtually this year so that we can be the change makers we need for the world that we want. Whoops. So I'm just going to go over a few logistic details about organizing Model UN Club. If you cannot meet face-to-face, what can you do? Well, obviously you can host an online Model UN meetings for your club. They can be organized according to the schedule that makes most sense for your school, whether it's after school or on weekends. Important to go over logistics and functions using a virtual platform. Many of us have already been working virtually, whether it's teaching or being a student virtually. Those very same features are the ones that you're going to use in Model UN. What we also want to do is to make sure that everyone can still do Model UN, even if it's going to be done a little differently virtually. So what can you do? Well, ahead of time, you need to create, obviously, I think that's my next slide. Create a sample agenda for a meeting and creating a schedule for your meetings. I'm sure this is something that you as a club have already done. So in a way, it's that part is all the same. What's new is how you work in a virtual reality. So establishing a Zoom account, and then with delegates in the club, knowing how to use the Zoom platform, how to test your mic and webcam, how to improve your Wi-Fi so that you're in a location that can allow you to be fully functional, how to adjust your monitor and become familiar with different video settings. So for example, as we saw in the Best Delegate video, the students had virtual backgrounds or they had flags of their countries hung behind them. That's easy to do by downloading a virtual flag. It's also important for students to know how to prepare the space where they're going to have their conference setting. So many, again, in the video we saw, many of the students were in their bedrooms, but notice the bed was made, there wasn't any clutter or food or devices around there. That's another thing that students will need to learn in order to be part of a virtual. Also making sure that lighting is ambient and that as well as sound, and that there aren't distractions such as other devices, and really also phones should be probably put in another room. Teaching the students how to use the different functions, for example, raising your hand, which would be another way of showing your placard, and the chat. The chat's a great function for note passing, whether you're passing it to other delegates or you're sharing it with your bureau or dais. We mentioned a little bit about the breakout rooms, but they're ideal for interaction, for caucusing or consultations, whether it's formal, informal, moderate, or not unmoderated. The breakout rooms are really ideal for that. So what can you expect on an online conference? Well, all online conferences are paying attention to the social aspects. Even if we're in a virtual reality, there are a lot of things that we can do to create a sense of belonging. And so the social aspect may take place through icebreakers or having an orientation day where delegates and the committees get to know one another, interact through different games, meet their dais or bureau, understand their roles, understand the formality. Even if it's a virtual reality, delegates need to be dressed for success, maintain diplomatic protocol throughout the session, and understand that when they give their speeches, they will be spotlighted. So they'll be in the center of the screen. And also helping delegates to understand that when speeches are being given, it's a great opportunity to take notes, to begin to determine where your allies are going to be. There are other optional events that are included with different Model UNs. In Montessori Model UN, we continue with cultural performance and a celebration night, have an SDG design contest, and ask an ambassador evening, so that we can really create lots of opportunities to get to know each other, interact with games, and have a sense of being together in this virtual space. And so for this, MMUN is create, oops, I'm a little, sorry, I keep doing oops. Now I'm going too many ways. Are you moving it for me, Chris? No. Okay. Let me see if I can go back. Next slide. Oh, we've created a delegate's journey for students who are new to an online conference that you can access through the link that was given in the PowerPoint. So it describes the steps in the interaction in the online conference. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Judith, and thank you, everybody. Yeah, so just some closing thoughts before we move into a Q&A session. Now, I think all of us just really want to stress that, yes, that there are many challenges that all of us are going to be facing this year. But I think if there's one takeaway, right, it's that Model UN conferences are still taking place, that they are adapting, they're finding new ways to deliver that vital global issue education to students. And we hope that the schools will be able to help participate in this and help provide this kind of education to the students. And we know that there are additional challenges and burdens placed on everybody this year. And that's why I think every conference is doing everything it can to try to ease that burden, to try to help provide more training materials for the students and give students more opportunities to engage with the conferences in case that they are not able to do so in their school setting. And again, you know, a lot of the things that we've discussed here today are things that everybody has to do right now. But I think going forward, it's not going to be uncommon to see the continuation of virtual conferences. And in fact, I'll also say that virtual conferences have existed since long before COVID as well. The MUN conference run by MUN Impact has been around for many, many years. And now a lot of the tools that conferences are using today are the tools that were pioneered first by that conference. So this is expected to continue, and it's going to be a great tool in the future for bringing students together from many different countries and cultures, even without having to pay to get a plane ticket or having to travel somewhere. Again, I know that we've said this a lot, but I really do want to stress this. Help is very broadly available, that all of these conferences and all these organizations want to support the Model UN community more than ever, because it's our goal, it's our mission, it's a personal mission. I think I can speak safely for all four of us. And it's a personal mission to try to promote Model UN and try to sustain the Model UN community and help it thrive. And we all have resources that we're happy to share with teachers, with students, with parents, whoever it might be. And so this is really an opportunity for the conferences, for students, and for teachers to really redouble their commitment to global issues education and the importance that it plays in a student's development. And it's an opportunity for students to really show extra leadership that's going to stand out in a resume or a college application. Through these challenges, we will come out the other side a much stronger community as an overall Model UN community. So with that, I will leave, that will be the end of the formal presentation, and I'm now happy to turn to any questions that any of the participants might have. If you'd like to ask a question over the air, you can feel free to raise your hands in the Zoom Reacts, and I'll be sure to try to look out for that and call on you. Or if you'd rather not have to speak, you can also put your questions in the chats as well, and we can field those one by one as they come up. But if that's all the time that you have to join us, thank you so much. We're thrilled that you were able to be here with us and learn with us. But yeah, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that folks might have. Yeah, and I see that looking in the chat right now, there are a lot of really fantastic questions about, some of the core operations of Model UN conference and how certain aspects of an in-person conference translate to the online setting. And I think that those questions are really great and really important because it really shows that so much of the Model UN experience can be translated from in-person to online. And as much as many of us would love to be going to places in person, that you can still really get that fundamental experience even from the online setting, right? Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please throw those in the chat. I have one that I'd kind of like to start off with. I'll let all three of our presenters kind of rotate quickly among here, but I think my question is, if there's one thing that you would recommend to a brand new delegate whose school doesn't do Model UN, which is a situation that comes up even before COVID, right? We get a lot of interest from students who are like, my school doesn't have a club, how can I still participate? What would the three of you recommend in each to a student in that situation, just really quickly? So whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, I'll go first since I work with the youngest students. For Montessori Model UN, we actually work directly with teachers or parents or even grandparents who want to help prepare students for Model UN. So students 9 to 15 years of age, we have now it's a 4-session Zoom workshop that we provide for people who want to be coordinators for preparing students for a Montessori Model UN conference. We don't prepare students directly, so there always is an adult involved, and therefore we would ask a student to see if they can convince a parent or a grandparent or their teacher to join a workshop, know how to prepare their students and how to engage in a conference.
I can elaborate off of Judith's guidance, which is so great. I would say, as a first-time person, I was introduced, thankfully, because of educators that invited me to participate. But if you have the inclination and the desire to get involved, don't be shy. I would say, a lot of the strength that I've garnered from being a Model UN participant for so long is the strength of my peers. And I don't think that there's anybody that you couldn't reach out to that is passionate about Model UN that wouldn't be completely willing to have a conversation and answer all of your questions and just talk through the process with you. It's really the strength of the people that we work with that build that institutional knowledge and kind of information sharing from whether it's between organizations or delegations. I think Model UN is really about the people and the good that we can do with those people. And so that would be my advice, is just don't be shy, just, get engaged, which is hard coming from, somebody who is very much introverted in a lot of instances. But I would say, push yourself and put yourself out there and just make those connections, because people will absolutely jump on the bandwagon with you.
Yeah, I think this year is probably the easiest year to actually get involved in Model UN if you're an individual delegate. because conferences are just way more accessible, both financially and logistically, if you can do it online. And there are a lot of one-day training conferences out there that you can go. And I'm recommending training conferences because I think it's like better experience to actually do Model UN than to try to like learn it through text or video or something like that. So just doing Model UN, I think where I grew up in Southern California, there are a lot of like one-day conferences, training conferences, and some of them have already passed. Santa Margarita, Cerritos, they've already hosted over 1,000 delegates each, and there are more to come. So in the circuit, Best Delegate, we're hosting our own one-day training conferences as well. But if you don't, if you're not ready for even the one-day conference, there are a lot of videos online now. If you look on YouTube, a lot of resources, a lot of webinars. I think, Angela, thank you for mentioning the Best Delegate one on November 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's a live webinar, and we're going to go over how to do Model UN on Zoom. And so there's a lot of resources out there. I think like just jump in and try. And the good thing is you try, you go to one and you realize, okay, this is how it's actually like. Now I can go to another, and it's really easy to sign up for the next one because there's so many out there that's online. So I think just logistically, it's a whole different game, and to take advantage of it this year.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We have a question from Paula, which I think Judith and perhaps Kevin might be well positioned to answer. And she's asking, during virtual conferences, are the different sessions recorded for long-term use? And what has been your thinking around that in the past?
All right, I'll go. Yes, we do record it, and we also broadcast it. We have a secure site where we broadcast to parents or teachers who are interested in watching the proceedings. And that before the conference, there are permission slips that are signed so that if a delegate does not want to be seen, then we are sure to block them.
Yeah, we record if we need to, and before we do so, we let the delegates know. All the delegates also signed a waiver form as part of the registration to be recorded. But usually we record mainly for like training purposes, if we want to show staff how things are done or show it for delegates. Otherwise, we don't record most of our other sessions. It's just like, delegates are more comfortable when things aren't recorded. Although delegates are also more formal when it is being recorded because they want to show their best selves. So there's pros and cons. I think every conference can just make their own choice on that one.
Yeah, you'll probably find some different policies there, I imagine. Another great question from Angie. That's kind of asking how the resolution writing process will work and how the delegates will be able to create and share their resolutions and their preambulatory and their operative clauses. And I can share a little bit about at least our organization's thinking around that. Kevin mentioned this earlier, but I think one of the best ways that we found to do this is to have a series of Google documents that are shared for all the participants so that it's not just like one caucus block can then access it and another one can't. So our idea is to create some templates that the whole committee can access, and the students can then type their resolutions into those shared documents that everybody can see. Everybody can hop into another resolution block if they, if their first one goes in a different direction or starts to disagree with their policy. It's pretty straightforward for them to visit a new group, find their resolution, and start working with them as well. And then at least something that we're doing is that, when we present the resolutions formally to the committee, NMUN has always like converted the students writing into like a template that looks very similar to the formal UN resolution template. And so once the students submit their draft to the dais, our kind of admin team, our behind the scenes team, goes in and like puts it into that very formal setting so that when it goes back and it's presented to the committee, they really get the feeling of reviewing an actual UN resolution, which really I think adds to the simulation aspect of the experience. But yeah, if anyone has a different plan or has a different strategy they've used, definitely share that, because a lot of these things will probably vary between the conferences.
I think because of the way the breakout rooms are structured on Zoom, instead of letting students do so much free flow and start their own Google Docs, which is what some conferences have, most of the online conferences, or at least the ones we run at Best Delegate, we already have predetermined Google Docs. So this is going to be the white blank Google Doc for resolution 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Which one do you want to be on? And then you'll get access to that specific one, or you should jump into that. I mean, maybe you have access to all three, but you should jump into that specific one to be one of the authors. So just to give it a little bit more structure, because we're missing that free flow unmoderated caucus environment where we can just roam around the room. So these things make it more simple for delegates to focus on, okay, here's my group that I'm working with.
I would add to that, that we found as well with Montessori Model UN conferences virtually, that we have streamlined processes and created more structure. It just makes it work better.
Awesome. And then, yeah, we have a question. Oops, where'd it go? There we go. We have a question from D. For those who have participated or run Model UN conferences already, did the student use internet to do research in real time, or is that a distraction? I think that's a really great question, because even before COVID hit, conferences had very different policies about technology in committee and what technology students are expected to access during the conference or during committee. So does someone want to jump in first?
I can jump in. Yeah, they can if they want to, but I think the speed of the online conference moves way faster just because there's, you don't have to stand up and sit down. You can just mute and unmute and talk, for moderated caucus. So yes, they can, but I think they're not going to really find much time to be able to do a lot of research. I think most of the students, the ones who are successful, are still the ones who prepared in advance.
Yeah, I'll second that. As a conference organizer, there's not much that we can do necessarily to restrict what the students are doing on their computers, just because we can't see what they're doing through their computer, through the Zoom platform at least. So that being said, and I think this is also advice that applies beforehand, where even if a student is allowed to do research in committee, it's often very obvious to a well-trained chair, like whether a student really has an understanding of what they're talking about, or whether or not they just looked up a statistic and they're just trying to throw that into the debate to look well researched. I think those things are easy to spot. And I think that at least the rubrics for performance that I know that a lot of our conferences use, we emphasize a lot more of the synthesis of information and being a critical thinker about information, rather than just, parroting facts without any context or without any analysis. So I think that'll still show through, but I don't think that there's any way to guarantee that students don't have another tab open with a Google search about something. I think that would probably be a pretty significant invasion of privacy on our part.
I think, Chris, there was a question if we could share our contact information. Are you able to share that on the slide, or?
I can't put it on the slide, or I can't edit it here, but I think I can do is we can all put it into the chat, and then I'm going to also send a message with the recording and the links to everybody who registered at least after this. So I can also include the contact information there, as well as a link to the recording if anyone wants to come back and reference this later. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
think that's great. Yeah, and Lily has a quick follow-up about a potential issue with Google Docs is that if anyone has access to it, other people other than the sponsors might be able to edit it, which can be counterproductive. And yeah, I mean, I can speak to this a little bit since I kind of put that plan out there. And yeah, I mean, Lily, that's definitely something that we are keenly aware of, right? And we're always trying to make sure that, I suspect that 99% of students are not going to try to actively sabotage somebody else, but you definitely can't say that number is 100%, and you want to have the mechanisms in place to protect the documents and to protect the students' work. But I think that's also another reason why the Google Docs works for us as such a great platform, because you can always go back and see the edit history and the version history of these documents, so that if somebody says hang on, wait a second, somebody deleted this clause and that wasn't approved by everyone, or they want to figure that out, that text is never really lost. That text is always preserved. And I think the other advantage of having the conference create the documents and sharing them with the students, in addition to that accessibility, is that also the conference can then, if there becomes a situation, which again, I mean, fingers crossed, that would never happen, but if the conference organizers own the document, then they can always ensure that that version history is there. Whereas if you're asking students to do it on their own or share their own documents, whoever owns that document has control over it, and they can ultimately decide to be malicious or be collaborative. So Yeah, it's definitely a concern that I think we're all aware of and focusing on, but I think that Google Docs has the tools needed to make sure that if there's any confusion, if there's a dispute, we can kind of stop things, pause things, and go back and figure out what happened. Yeah. And thank you guys for those in the chat who are sharing these kind words. I'm really glad that many of you found this information to be helpful. And again, yeah, we'll be sharing that recording with you in case you want to go back and refer to anything later on. Yeah, but if anyone has any other questions for us before we all head out, I know we're getting close to the hour here. Awesome. Here we go. One last question. From Louis again, do you have any MUN software to keep track of votes / the speakers list? I don't know if somebody is itching to share whatever platform they're using. I think that's a really good question.
Actually, we've just simplified it to Google Docs. So we just actually have the running speakers list because that's where we type all our motions and everything else. So we have what we call a whiteboard, which is really just a Google Doc. That's like a running thing that the committee chair uses instead of speakers list software. For votes, Zoom auto tallies the vote for you. So that takes like a second to just really understand. You're just no longer the counting of the votes. So that's how we keep track of the votes.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, Google's platform as a whole has become even more accessible and functional in terms of conference planning and execution. I think MMUN DC is planning on using Google Forms to help track procedural and substantive votes. Similar to how we're really using a Google Doc template for, resolution drafting. So Google Forms will be a big thing for NMUN.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too. I mean, I've been to been virtually rather to other conferences that have used like sophisticated tools, or like there's a Chrome add-on out there that can manage the speakers list and show the timer on the screen. And those are definitely options that some conferences may choose to use. But I think as been pointed out, even if you're a large conference or even if you're a local conference, that kind of the built-in tools that Zoom and Google Docs has can really make the process extremely simple so that the voting is clear and transparent and that the chair can very quickly report the results out. Yeah. And yeah, Alejandra, we will share this slideshow publicly with folks so that everybody can access it later on. And yeah, we'll put the links to the recording online as well. Awesome. Well, I just want to say for the last time, thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm glad that so many of you have found this information helpful. We'll send out the contact information for the 4 of us afterwards, so that if you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach us. I know that a lot of us have experience well beyond just our own events and conferences that we're running, so we're happy to give any general advice if you'd like as well. But I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their weekend and have a good afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you might be. And yeah, happy Model UNing, everybody. Take care, guys.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. That's true. Yeah.